I actually saw Samantha's testimony that her husband taped of her, and I just know there's so many girls and women out there with the same story, and a lot of them that maybe feel like they're going through this time alone. And I think when we hear other people's testimonies, we know that we're not in the battle alone. That, and I know she's going to share with you that Jesus can bring you through anything that you're going through. So I have the pleasure of introducing y'all. Please welcome Miss Samantha Benefield.
Hi, I'm Samantha. I'm so nervous, but I'm so excited that God is using me, and I'm already going to cry. I never want to let my fears get in the way of serving the Lord. So I'm just going to start all the way from the beginning. I was raised right here in Ballplay, and I loved my childhood. I had a very happy childhood, and I was raised by wonderful parents, and they always taught me the importance of going to church, and they taught me to love church. But even as a child, I remember struggling with fear, and it was more a fear of man. I always wanted to please people. I never wanted to disappoint anybody. Going into my teenage years, that fear only grew. And it's hard being a teenage girl anyways. You start comparing yourself to other girls, and that's what I did. I started comparing myself. And I didn't like what I saw. I was very shy and quiet, and I wanted to be more outgoing and more outspoken like some of the other girls that I was friends with. So this just made me start having so many negative thoughts in my mind, and it just really made me start to hate myself. I dealt with not having enough self-worth, just never feeling good enough, and still just trying to seek people's approval to be happy. I thought, if people approved of me, then I would be happy then. And I was just so afraid of rejection. My thought was, if I'm perfect and pleasing, then I'll be happy and loved. So at the age of 15, I found myself with an eating disorder. I would eat and then make myself throw up. For me, my eating disorder was more about control. I couldn't control my fears, but I could control this eating disorder. And it's something that I did not need people's approval for, because they didn't know about it, and they couldn't disapprove of it. It was my little secret that I had control over, but in reality, it was spinning out of control. After some time of this, I thought, this is God punishing me. And I didn't understand why He wasn't rescuing me from this. And I started to think, well, this is all that God has for my life. And I kind of accepted it in a way, because I thought, well, I deserve this. And really, I just was not allowing God to deal with my heart. I just kept stuffing it with anxiety. So by this point in my eating disorder, my hair was falling out. I started to have some medical issues. And I remember on this particular day, I remember stepping on the scale, and it's going to 90 pounds. And I remember thinking, as soon as I saw that 90 pounds, I remember thinking, well, if I just lose a little bit more, then I'll be happy. And after I thought that, I was like, this is not normal, and I really need help. So after that, I started trying to seek help, trying to tell somebody, but still being so afraid, just being so ashamed and so embarrassed. And even though I wasn't truly saved at this time, now looking back, I can see God's protection on my life. So He made a way for me to be able to tell my mom. And I finally got to tell my mom, and I was so relieved. And she was so understanding, but I was still afraid, still ashamed, still embarrassed. But she was so understanding, and that's just what I needed at the time. And I got to tell her that day, but my dad wasn't there. I didn't get to tell my dad until the next morning. So I remember the very next morning waking up and not wanting to get out of the bed. I was so afraid of my dad's reaction. I was so afraid that he was going to be ashamed of me. He was going to be embarrassed of me. He was just going to think I was disgusting. Just so afraid. So before I could even get the courage to get out of bed, my dad comes in my room, and he just lays down with me in my bed. He wraps his arms around me, and that's exactly what I needed in that moment. I needed to feel loved. In Romans 5:8, before I read that, looking back to that moment, it makes me think, if my earthly father can love me that much, then how much does our heavenly Father love us? And in Romans 5:8 it says, "But God demonstrates his own love towards us in that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us." And that tells me that God loves me right now in this moment, standing here giving you all my testimony. He loves me the same right now as he did when I was deep in my sin. And that his love never changes for us. And I'm so thankful for that. My family really started praying for me. And every time I read or hear the story about the paralyzed man that Jesus heals, I'm reminded of my family. Because I felt like that paralyzed man laying on that mat. Because I was paralyzed. I was paralyzed in fear. And God heard my family's prayers, and he saw their faith, and that's why I was healed. So, and they're here tonight. Most of the ones that prayed for me are here tonight. But I was finally physically healed from my eating disorder, but it took my mind a little bit longer. And I finally had a healthy relationship with food, but what I needed was a relationship with Jesus Christ. As an adult, I dealt with depression and panic attacks. I had all these emotions and all these fears, and by this point, I was like, why am I still dealing with this? So I just wanted to hide all the emotion, all the fear. I didn't want anybody to know that I was still dealing with this. So I carried all these fears with me into my marriage and into my motherhood, just still feeling so unworthy and just not enough. Our very first Sunday here, during the invitation, my husband and I both go down to the altar. And I remember not really knowing what to pray. I just remember feeling so broken. And Isaac Thacker comes down and he prays with us. And he asks us both if we know for sure that we're saved. And I remember looking Isaac right in the eyes and telling him, yes, I know for sure that I'm saved. But I need to be better for my family. I need to be better for my husband. I need to be better for my children. And I just told God, I'm going to start being better. And I was still just striving for perfection but failing. And I was still trying to take control of everything when really I just needed to give God control. So a few weeks later, my husband gets saved. And I remember being so happy for him, but I remember being scared to death. And I knew I didn't need to feel that way. But I started seeing him change. And he started leading our home like he was supposed to. And I'm so thankful for his obedience. And he showed me what true surrender looks like. So about a month later, on May the 7th, 2017, during the invitation, God spoke to me and he said, you have never fully trusted in me. It's time to surrender. And my family was actually there that day because Jordan was going to get baptized. So I grabbed my mom and I took her to the altar. And I just told God, I'm so sorry. because I had been thinking about myself and my problems for so long. And I told him that I was done living in fear and that I was ready to trust. So since getting saved, God has taken away so much fear and anxiety, and he's put in love and joy. And in 2 Timothy 1:7 it says, "For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and sound mind." And it's actually on my bracelet too. He gives me the power to be confident. That's why I'm standing right here. He gives me a love for myself that I never thought I would have. He gives me a love for others. He has completely renewed my mind, and he's taken out all the negative and all the self-hate. And he shows me every day that I'm worthy and enough just because I'm his. And in Colossians 1:17 it says, "And he is before all things, and in him all things hold together." God is in control of my life, and I'm so thankful that I don't have to be, and I was never meant to be. And one of my favorite things about being saved is I now have purpose in my life. I know that my purpose is to tell my story and to lead others to Christ and to love and encourage and serve others. And my purpose also is to raise my 2 little girls. And I know that it's not an accident that I have girls. I'm going to teach them, or I am teaching them, that they are fearfully and wonderfully made, and that they are worthy and they are enough because God created them. I want to teach them to be brave, whether it's holding a bug or ordering their own food at a restaurant. We always tell each other, kind of like you, we always tell each other when we do something brave. And I'm so excited that I get to go home and I get to tell them that I was brave tonight because I trusted in God, and he's holding my hand and he's never going to let go. Deuteronomy 31:6 says, "Be strong and of good courage. Do not fear nor be afraid of them. For the Lord your God, he is the one who goes with you. He will not leave you nor forsake you." I want to teach my girls to not fear man or try to please man, but only God. Psalms 37:4 says, "Delight yourself also in the Lord, and he shall give you the desires of your heart." The desire of my heart is to teach my girls to have a great faith. Faith in God, faith in his promises, faith in his goodness, faith in his justice, and faith in his saving power. And I want to always fearlessly believe in God, and I pray that they see that in me. And the last verse that I would like to read is Proverbs 12:25, and it says, "Anxiety weighs down the heart, but a kind word cheers it up." If you are going through an eating disorder, you have fear, you have anxiety, please come get me and talk to me. I would love to encourage you and pray with you. And if you've never surrendered your life to Christ, I pray that you do, because you don't have to live in fear. There's such a better life waiting for you. And the last thing I would like to say is, I'm no longer a slave to fear. I'm a child of God.